Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Learning the Tropes. I just wanted to come on here before we get started with the official episode, just because I have a few things I just wanted to chat with you all about. So the first thing is we might have a few new listeners this week, and I want to say welcome. I hope you stick around. The format of Learning the Tropes is I will have basically three different kinds of episodes. So the first kind is author interviews. So mostly romance authors talking about their books, talking about their process. The next will be veteran episodes. And so that's when somebody who is a romance fan will come and chat with me and bring me a book that they love that I haven't read yet. And we'll kind of discuss the book from there. Then we have virgin episodes, and that is what this is this week, where a guest who has never read a romance novel before will join me to chat about a romance novel that I've chosen for them. So the way it works, there are two-part episodes. The first part is what you're going to be hearing next, and that is when the guest and I kind of sit down and chat about their approach to romance novels, sort of what preconceived notions they might have, how excited they are, kind of what they might be looking for in a romance novel, and then I give them one to read. This week, I chatted with a dear friend who is a director and producer and writer and kind of everything, America Ferrera. She is obviously currently on strike as she is a member of SAG. And so we weren't able to chat about kind of any of her past, present, future work. So if you're wondering why it is that those things don't come up, it's because of the strike. And here at Learning the Tropes, we are and will always be fiercely pro-union. So want to send out, good wishes to everybody who is currently striking. So that's this week's episode. Next week is going to be a longer episode, normally about an hour, where we'll talk through the book. It'll be kind of like a book report. If you're new and you want to find out more, figure out what we're reading next, you could always follow me on Instagram at Learning the Tropes. That's mostly where I'm posting kind of what's coming up next. All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have everybody here, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have America with me as well. So I hope you all enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Learning the Tropes. Today, I'm introducing a virgin reader to romance, and our reader this week is actress, author, producer, director, and dear friend, America Ferrera. Hi, America.
Hi, Erin.
Thanks so much for joining me and doing this. I am always so excited to introduce people to romance novels, but especially, you've been front lines for my journey to romance.
I mean, I am curious. You've been one of my best friends for, geez, how many years now? Who even knows? Many.
Like 20
I mean,
or 19. I
geez,
lost
no,
time.
not 20. Oh shit, almost 20. Is this a family podcast? Am I not allowed to say words like shit?
Oh, we've said so much worse than shit.
Of course, this is a romance podcast. Yes, we've been friends so long, and then I know that you've always been like an avid reader and consumer of worldly things. But then I was like, I didn't ever realize you were so into romance novels. And then you started a podcast about it, and then we were sitting on my couch, and I was like, "What? Tell me about romance novels." Like, my only understanding of romance novels is a very pedestrian, mainstream one of like, oh, there must be lots of like, hot, shower masturbation scenes in a romance novel. But I feel like that's because I don't know anything. And so I'm like, one of my best friends literally has a podcast about romance novels. Maybe I should learn about it. So here we are. I'm here to learn. Tell me.
Exactly. Well, so we talked a little bit that evening on the couch about romance novels, and then you very astutely were like, "Let's just save this all for the podcast." So we had like a mini convo, and now we're going to have a longer convo. And I'm going to assign you a book which you have been carrying around with you for months. And then your schedule has opened up.
because my union just had to go on a strike for me
Mhm,
to figure this out. But yes, actors are striking, writers are striking, and so
mhm.
I'm like, well, what else is there to do but talk about romance novels? Let's go, girl. And
Exactly.
I am going to read the book. I carried it with me. Yes, you're right. So on many flights and hotel rooms, and you know, I'm tired, so I didn't read it. But I'm
No.
going to. I'm nothing if not a good student. So now that now that an assignment is has been given, I will do it.
And so, do you remember the two things that a book needs to have to be a romance novel?
Oh God. A happy ending.
Yes, happily
Literally
ever
say a
after.
happy ending. I remember that.
Yes.
I love that. I love that idea that if it doesn't have a happy ending, it's not a romance, it's a love story, which is easy
Mhm.
to remember because of the movie Love Story, which is so sad and does not have a happy ending. Okay, so I love that. And then was the first one like something about like the way people meet or something? What is sorry, what's the first what's I can't remember it. What's the first
A,
rule?
a central love story.
A central love story. Okay, so it
Yeah.
can't be like a B plot.
Exactly. It can't be like just in the background, oops, and in the end they end up in love. Like it has to be the story. And it can be obviously there are sapphic love stories, there are gay love stories, there are poly, there romance novels, so the configuration is very open. There are monster romances, shifter romances. It's a
Wait, monster
whole runway.
romances? Oh yes, we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, monster romances are, I mean, they're not new, but they're really having a moment right now where it's just different mythical creatures falling in love with people. And the thing that I love about romance is that the women, mostly women, who write these stories, even if it is like a centaur falling in love with a woman or a minotaur, it's like taken very seriously. And it's written like, what would it be like if a minotaur fell in love with a woman? And you get to read it. And it's
One of the things that you said that made me interested in learning more was, about because you take it seriously, and so
mhm.
that is enough to pique my interest of like, why do you take it seriously? And then I'm a little bit ashamed that I haven't taken it seriously. But one of the things you said, and maybe you can elaborate because I was like, wait, stop talking, let's record it for your podcast. Was what you said about how like that romance is like it's literature, but it has been kind of relegated to some niche, diminished genre because it's mostly written by women and for women. And I found that super interesting. And like, do you even know? I mean, I feel like you know the history of everything. You just had a better public education than I did. But uh, what what is the history of romance novels? Like, do you actually know?
So I wrote like romance novels have existed since like Jane Austen. And so like Jane Austen wrote contemporary romances. She wrote what was happening around her. And a lot of her books are romance novels.
So there
Romance
were no
novels,
romance novels before Jane Austen.
no, there certainly were. I mean, love stories about a couple falling in love that ended happily. I mean, honestly, yes, they had to have existed, but
Right.
they didn't. But a lot of times also they end tragically because I think there's somebody much smarter than me can talk about why we take a romance that ends in somebody dying or people being hurt more seriously than one where people end up whole and in love and in community, and why those
Mm.
like one is devalued. um but romance novels in the way that we think about romance novels now really started with a book called The Flame and the Flower. That was this first romance that was basically just like centered a woman and centered her story falling in love. And it's a tough read now because the thing that romance always does is reflect the society that it's a part of at the moment, and what's happening in society. And I think also because women are have to be so forward thinking just because of I don't know if it's like having children, or you just I feel like women are constantly looking to the future in a certain way. um it's pretty in tune with that. And so with these early romances, there was something called forced seduction, which is kind of the original sin of romance, which is basically women weren't allowed to be outwardly sexual and to have outwardly sexual desires. And so in order for us to like this woman, we needed to have her say like no, no, no to sex, and then eventually be taken over by passion. And that's how we knew she was a good girl. Not the
Mm.
case currently with romance. And with romance, you won't, consent is huge with modern romance. I mean, anything written after like the mid 90s, unless it's a specific like dark romance.
That's so
Um,
interesting. So in a way, it like tracks with where we are culturally with like women and their sexual, with their permission to own their sexuality.
exactly. Yeah. And it's a space where women were allowed to have desire in a way that I think, we're not allowed to always in society. We always have to have this dichotomy of um, being very good at sex but not wanting sex, and all of these things in a way where romance novels really allowed for that in a way that I thought was really important. And I think the other thing with romance novels and why it's derided, it's a genre that always seems to be judged by the worst books and not the best.
Mm. Mm.
So it's which I think is emblematic also of an experience of womanhood. And I think because people, when they're like, find out I like romance novels, they're like, are they good? And it's such a crazy question because it's like, are movies good? It's like, well, yes,
There are
some
good
are.
ones and there are bad ones. I mean, it
Yeah.
feels like the film equivalent is like romantic comedies, right? The fact that romantic comedies are about women, for women, like those, and that they are some sort of like like B class genre of film.
Right. Or it's okay to not try as hard with a romantic comedy just because, like, oh, just like women are gonna read whatever it is. Where I think
Right.
there are some truly transformative romance novels that I think can be up there with any of like the great novels that have been written. I think Flowers from the Storm by Laura Kinsale is one of them. Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase is one, where these are just phenomenal books and phenomenal writing.
Mm.
Um,
The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about like, this being a place where women could just even like, eh, you know, express sexual desire or, one of the things I was remembering was like reading a long time ago, maybe it's a totally out of date finding, but I remember just a really long time ago reading about research that was that like that that a majority of women's desire responds to story in a way that like and I think it was like you know that the majority of the time men responded to pictures and that women's bodies didn't respond the same way to pictures, they responded to story. And I thought
mhm.
that was fascinating. And again, I might have just quoted a very out of date and debunked, you piece of research, but I found that fascinating. And do we know? Do you know? Do men read romance novels?
I mean, yeah, there are men who read romance novels. There are men who write romance novels. I mean, a lot of time it's gay romance novels. I think it's such a small, it's a small part of the genre, but like definitely they do exist.
Yeah.
But I agree, and I think that's also the thing about romance novels when people are just like, oh, it's just about sex and it's just like a way for women to get off. And like, listen, there are some sexy romance novels, and I have assigned you one that is sexy, but it is only sexy in the context of the greater story. So the build up over time, that once these characters are having sex, you're like, hell yes, I earned this,
Yeah.
in a way that if you were
Yeah.
to just pull these sex scenes out, they would not have the same weight. And then inversely, if they didn't exist in the book, they wouldn't also, the story would be incomplete because sex is ultimately a way of communication, and sort of the way that you have sex says something about emotionally where you are and how you're able to explore and how you're able to feel intimacy with somebody.
Now, what's the feeling inside the romance novel community around like the idea that it's all about just like getting off? Like that it's like, that it's like a Playboy but with more words, and the point of it is to like get all hot and bothered and then pleasure yourself somehow.
But I think the thing is, I mean, so there's like erotic romance, which is really just focused
Uh-huh.
kind of that's more centering just the sex scenes in a way that a romance novel doesn't need to have sex scenes. So I mean the title
See, this
for
is interesting to me. This is all
yeah.
nuance that is just does not, enter the mainstream. So there's a difference between like an erotic novel and a romance novel.
Yes. So if it centers the sex acts, then that's an erotic romance versus, you know, it's called clean romance. I think they're trying to like figure out a new word for it for obvious reasons, but like
Mm.
then there's also and will be closed door, which means that you don't go into the bedroom with the characters. Normally you just they like kiss or something. I mean, sometimes it's
Um,
even Christian romances where I don't know that they do that before they get married.
Tell me about the book you assigned to me. And like, are
Okay.
there tropes? Do you want to tell me what the tropes are that I should be looking out for, or should we save that for the conversation after I've read it?
I mean, I think we could save it for the conversation after you've read it, but I'm more than happy to talk about the book that I assigned you. And it was so hard coming up with a book for you, because we
Why?
cycled through a few books. Because I think whenever you're assigning somebody their first romance, you definitely want it to be one that you know that they'll enjoy. So I cycled through a few. And then I finally came upon this book, which is Suddenly You by Lisa Kleypas, because I think Lisa Kleypas is such a wonderful romance author, and the way that she writes is very tropey and fun but has a lot of weight to it. She does a lot of things in every one of her books. She uses like objects in a very interesting way. Every one of her books has like a special object in it. um, and I think this book is a classic romance, but also has enough of a twist that you'll enjoy. So basically, it's about a woman named Amanda, and it takes place in London in the like,
1800, late 1800s.
yeah. And she's an author and she is turning 30 and she decides that she wants to have sex. So she goes to a madam to have somebody arrange to have her send somebody over. The person that the madam sends over is not a gigolo, but instead her editor, unbeknownst to her. And then that sort of starts from there. And I think,
Oh my gosh, scandalous.
I know. And so it kind of sets off a lot of really interesting tropes within it, which is like mistaken identity and her being on her own. And it also sets up sort of the world within uh, romance novels, kind of the setting of how it exists.
What are some of the general tropes?
Yeah, because the thing about romance too that I love is the parameters are so specific and that the central love story and we know it's going to end happily. And the amount that writers are able to move within that space as far as like so many different stories, I find so fascinating when we know how it's going to end. Um, and so yeah, so there's enemies to lovers, there's secret baby, there's
Oh, secret baby. Enemies to
secret baby.
lovers.
Yeah.
Secret baby.
Mistaken identity, um,
Okay.
like alpha male, virgin heroine. You can get really specific with the tropes, but they are also writers are able to sort of utilize these tropes or sort of like the paint that they're able to paint with, and you can see how each trope is explored differently based on the author.
All right. So then maybe next time I'll come to you with a list of what I think a trope might be, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to read the book.
Yeah, how are you feeling going into your first romance?
I feel genuinely like relieved to be reading something like fun and not like for work or that's super serious or like
Mhm.
self-helpy. So I'm like, yay, I'm kind of excited. about that. I don't know. I think I'm just going into it with like a super open mind. It's the first like explicitly romance novel that I've ever taken on. So I'm really excited. I can't wait to talk about it when I'm all done.
Okay, good. And this, so you have a week to read it, almost exactly, or exactly. And also, the thing about romance novels, if it takes you more than 3 days to read one, and now you have family and a job and all these other extenuating factors, but like you should tear through a romance novel, and especially a Clay Pass. I feel like you're going
Okay.
to tear through it. Thanks so much for doing this. And so, if anybody wants to follow you, I can't imagine, but you're America Ferrera on all.
Instagram's the only one I really do. I don't do the
Okay.
others. Um, just at America Ferrera. I'm excited to have an assignment and also like to finish a book between now and next Friday. I'm like, I can do it.
You can do it. I believe in you. Um, yeah, tell the kids, be like, it's something special for Zia, and so you need to leave me alone.
I'll see Zia needs me to read this book.
Yeah.
Baz will be like, what are they doing on the cover of that book?
I will tell you, whenever Celia comes over, she always picks out all of my romance novels off the shelf because she's just like, these pretty dresses. And I'm like, yeah, girl. I'm like, in about 10 years, we'll get you reading those.
Oh my God. I love it.
Um,
Um, okay, well, I have homework to do then. I'm going to go read my book and then we'll TBC this convo. That means to be continued. That's how
oh, to be
you know,
continued.
yeah, yeah, that's what the young people say because I'm the young person.
Well, we'll see. Everybody will see you next time for the America's first romance novel. It's thrilling. Until then, everybody, happy reading.
Yay! Thank you. Happy reading.